Yeah, we're live. Hey, my name is Frank. Welcome to Hangout number 21. We're here to talk to you guys today about summer camps and missions trips. If you are not already planning your summer plans, you are behind the eight ball. You need to get that started as soon as you can. But we're here today with Ben Reed, Brian Lucas, and Delmar P, and we're going to talk about summer camps and winter retreats. Summer camps and mission trips. Once Ben is done talking to his wife, I think. So Brian, how you doing?
Good, man. What's up, Frank?
No, how's Nevada in January?
It's Nevada.
Not where
Nevada.
I'm from. Not in Arkansas.
I
It's
can't.
Nevada.
Well, I can't help how Arkansas pronounces that, but
Arkansas. They'll shoot you if you call it Arkansas. Yeah.
yeah.
So how is it? Are you dealing with the cold front and everyone else is dealing with?
No, it's not as bad out here. It's actually like 55 or something today, so it feels warm.
Cool.
So,
Cool.
yeah, it's pretty legit. Wish we had some snow though.
Well, we haven't had
You guys
hasn't
start the
snowed here yet.
discussion.
Well, we're waiting for you to be done with your wife so we could start.
No, it
So, but
wasn't the wife,
we
our secretary.
uh,
I gotta go check something
uh,
in the gym. I'll be right back.
okay. Well, we'll start the conversation. Hey, okay. I don't know. Can I unmute Delmar?
I can unmute myself, I
Oh,
think, right?
there you go. That's perfect. So,
What
what
do
are
you
you
do?
guys what are you guys doing this summer in terms of camps and mission trips? Let's start with that.
Well, I was talking about recently how we're going to Hume Lake, which is pretty uh, top of the line as far as like if you're going to go all out on expense and paying for like the huge name camp on the West Coast. Hume is massive. They take just for their high school camp. They do like 10 weeks where it's like around a little over 1,000 students each week. So I mean
Crazy.
they're big, big.
I
Um,
mean, not living in the West, like I don't know anything about you, like, but it seems like to me that if you are a church that exists over from like California and all the west side of the United States, you go to Hume Lake, right? Like that's what at least my perception is. I don't know anything about this camp except it
yeah,
sounds like the Disney World of Christian summer camps,
sort of. Yeah, it
right?
feels
Yeah.
that way a lot of the time. Before I'd ever been there, I did youth ministry in Southern California for 10 years and never went to Hume
Really?
because I was in the Assemblies of God and they had all district stuff, and so we would go to our district camps and everything. And when you're at a beach church, they don't care about summer camp. They're like, dude, we live at the beach. Summer camp is let's go surfing, you know. And so,
Right.
but Hume was like legendary. It was like the thing you have to go to, or you've never done summer camp. And
Yeah.
I gotta say, it pretty much deserves its reputation. It's pretty sick.
I'll say real quick, this right here.
What are we doing?
I don't know. You kept saying you wanted more skin tone. Than this. So I'm just saying,
I never said that.
this scar right here. That's
Yeah.
from Hume.
Wow.
Represents
Nice.
what?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
When I
Well,
was like 16, we went there for winter camp, and I fell off the inner tube on the big run, and it
Mm.
was just like solid ice, and I slid on my hip bone for like 20 feet, and just scraped all the skin and everything off. And the nurse was the rudest person I ever met. I was just yelling at me for not
Nice.
being fat enough. So
Church
look at
camp.
me now, Hume Lake nurse.
hey, Brian. Real quick. We know
Yo.
you do it for somebody. Are you doing a mission trip?
We are, but not over the summer. We go to Mexico for spring break, and
I've
so
always wanted to know how people do spring break mission trips. I feel like that's the most inefficient time to do a trip at all.
no,
But
it's great.
only in my context, because when we do spring break, everyone and their mom leaves the state. But that's, I think, normal for Arkansas. So
Uh,
I always want to know what other. I hear about everyone else doing spring break mission trips, and I never knew how that worked out. Okay, so Delmar, in your loud Starbucks, what are you doing this summer?
We are taking our students to camp called Lookup Lodge. And I'm assuming, Brian, your camp is like high production value, right? Like,
oh yeah,
I'm,
it's
yeah,
huge.
yeah.
They've got an
See,
opening
we,
number that's like massive.
oh, we've we used to go to a camp here in South Carolina, and it had massive production. But unfortunately, unlike what it seems Humes does, like the content wasn't there, you know.
Mm.
So we're going to a camp called Look Up Lodge, man, and it is awesome. It's got the whole backwoodsy feel, you know. There's probably 300 to 500 students there a week. Um, but it's a very good atmosphere, especially when the kids are leaving and they're talking about the fun stuff they had. But they're like, dude, what did you think about what Greg said this week? You know, like even when my middle schoolers are having those conversations, that lets me know that this is kind of the camp we need to be investing ourselves into, because I see it, the conversation pouring into our next school year as well. So,
Yeah.
Are you doing a mission trip?
what we're doing is our students are partnering with, we're not a huge church, man. Like our church itself is 180 to 200, and our student ministry is probably, it's about 60 right now. So we don't really have.
I think it was Martin, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. Go ahead.
Wait, hold on.
So-
You have 60 kids in your youth group in a church of 200 people. That's a huge group.
Yeah. Well, I say 60. Let me be completely forthcoming on what would you consider like your outreach night. You know what I'm saying? We got 60 coming. Okay. So I'm freaked out about it. You know, a lot of them go to camp and stuff, but we don't have the resources to do two fully funded things, you know?
Yeah.
So our church is partnering with another church down the road, a bigger church, and some of our students are going with them, still as students from our church, but on their mission trip with them. So they're still able to kind of bridge that gap and make that happen. And honestly, I like to see them taking that kind of initiative and responsibility as well. But that's where we're at. They're going to Brazil.
Cool. Ben, what about you? What about you, Ben?
We're still putting together. One thing that our group has traditionally done a big spring break trip to Myrtle Beach. We're in Chicago, but we're trying to set a new direction, and so we're trying to go, like you said, going to the East Coast, go to the West Coast. So I'm trying to put together sort of a camp mission trip outreach all in one thing. Just having a few bands drive out to Huntington Beach, and I'm looking at a few campsites out there right on the beach that have like little cabins, do our own camp, do service projects around the city, connect with a few other churches out there that show our students of different leadership teams, and it's going to sort of be a mission trip camp combined that we're putting together for June. And then we'll have this inner city impact here in Chicago that they've done for the past 10 years, I guess, whatever. That's our big service project for a week downtown. So those are our two big as far as mission or camp.
Yeah. In our church, so our philosophy with mission trips is we do an international trip for just high school kids 1 year, and then the next year we open it up to the entire youth group, 7th through 12th grade, with a domestic trip. And so last year we went to Costa Rica, which is an amazing trip, which I know, Ben, you've been to, and a couple other people went to the same place. But for our summer trip this year, we're going to Central Florida, and I say Central in a vague way because we're going to both Tampa and Orlando, and that's where I'm originally from, and so I have a lot of connections there. And one thing we can talk about maybe in a little bit is talking about distance for missions trips and how to figure it out, because I know you're going to the West Coast, and you're planning on driving to Huntington Beach.
Yeah, it's like a 32-hour drive for us.
32 hours?
Yeah.
Bananas. No, that's crazy.
That's a mission trip.
They're
Just
used
getting
to the
there, man.
20-hour drive to Myrtle Beach.
Right. No, I mean, both trips are crazy, and like, you know, it was like, I think it's about a 20-hour drive to Florida, and I said we're gonna fly, and I know you and I disagree on whether I should drive or fly. I said I found super cheap plane tickets, and we're gonna fly to Florida because I don't want to deal with a long behind drive to Florida. But we're also doing a summer camp, which, you know, ever since I became a youth pastor, the only summer camp I've ever been to, aside for 1 year, was we've done student life summer camps. And you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I just love student life.
I've heard that they're great.
Yeah, and I know what Ben's going to complain about in a second, so I'm going to say it for him. Student life doesn't believe to go north of the Mississippi, apparently, and they
Mississippi, you're still way north, and also that runs north-south. What are you talking about?
Whatever. Okay, my bad.
I don't think student life has ever heard of
I'm
any
in
states
Cuba.
outside of Alabama or Florida.
No, they're in the Carolinas, and they're in Texas. I mean, this year
Whoa, wow.
Yeah, a
we're going
lot
to
of churches that go to them around here.
we're going to a camp in Texas this year. But yeah, they don't do like New England or Boston, and so maybe if Student Life is watching, our northern brethren want to see a Student Life camp. But
There's kids in Boston that want camp, and every camp organization just ignores them because, I don't know, it's not profitable. If you do something, you'll get every youth group in Boston, I'm telling you. Like, everyone thinks, oh, don't do it, you won't make money, because that's what it's apparently all about for some organizations. Not saying that about student life, but
it's not about
uh,
Student Life. No.
it's not about money. But if that's the hesitation of these organizations, like, you have no idea how much interest you would get if you properly advertise it out there.
Sure, sure. And so that's our plan for the summer is we're doing both. And so I think from what I've gathered is everyone else is kind of doing just one thing, which I think leads to a good question that I think a lot of people are asking is what should you do? Should you just do one trip in the summer, one big trip? Should you try to do a summer camp and a mission trip? Should you, I mean, and if you only do one trip, what you should do? It seems like in this group of 4 people, everyone's choosing camp except for Ben doing his hybrid thing, which is really cool because a lot of organizations are leaning towards doing that kind of hybrid camp mission trip thing. But I've been trying to do both for a number of years. I have a philosophy behind it, but I'll let you guys go first. Why do you choose the trip you chose, and why not do both in the summer when you have such a big break of time? So anyone go in first.
Yeah, I think for me
Brian,
it's
you
kind
go.
of two things. It's can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we hear.
Yeah, we
Okay.
hear you.
Yeah. For me, it's kind of two things. First, it's the students. It's you got to take into account where are we at. Maturity of our kids. Where are they at? I mean, that'll also determine if you go on a mission trip. Where are you going? Like, can you do international? Definitely not with younger students.
Right.
And second of all, resources. I know with us, we have to help raise funds for our kids. And if I was to throw two of them in there, they're just going to basically have to pick one. And when we go together, I like the idea of us having this being unified and going together, building relationships, doing discipleship along with each other, and half of them having to choose between each one. Sometimes that can kind of break down that community. So it kind of depends on where your kids are and where you are just financially. At least that's where I've seen it.
Sure.
Yeah, those are interesting points. We have, like I said, we go to Hume Lake for our big high school camp. They offer middle school as well, but part of what kills us on cost there is transportation. And so we go to a closer local camp for middle school. And part of the reason we don't do a mission trip along with that in the summer, we did last year. We did like a tester trip to kind of see if Camp Barnabas out in, I believe it's in Arkansas. I didn't go on that trip, but we tried that one out to see how a late summer mission trip would work. And with 2 different camps to do, and we go the week before 4th of July for high school, and then we go the week after the 4th for middle school. Adding another trip in the summer was kind of a nightmare. There was so much stuff going on. I really like the idea of having our spring break trip. Students are out of school, but they're not enough out of school that people really go places. Some people are doing vacations and whatnot, and so we miss out on a couple opportunities. But honestly, we took like 27 kids or 27 people, including the chaperones, to Mexico last year, and we're looking at probably similar numbers this year. It was an amazing trip, and we took a bunch of junior high girls to mix and lay concrete, and they were killing it. There was another group there at the same place, same time, that had a bunch of big football player dudes, and they weren't working half as hard as all of our junior high girls. So I mean, we get a lot out of that separation. It really helps keep clear boundaries between summer camp is kind of a more, like introductory or like, hey, come back to Jesus and meet him for a week at camp, or bring a new student, and if they can pony up the dough and do some fundraising, get them to camp where they can come and have a great time and laugh their heads off and play games together, and then hear really solid teaching about Jesus every day. Mission trip, we're not so much taking that same crowd, obviously, and gives us a chance to do that more discipleship focused thing where we're going, hey, you got to break out and see way beyond your comfort zone into what Jesus wants done in this world and how we can be a part of that. And we had a girl that was kind of like on the fence as far as being a believer that came with us to Mexico, and technically like got saved the following week after we got back, but she was totally like praying for people while on the trip, and like that was the first time she'd ever prayed for anybody, and going like, I'm not sure how to even articulate this, but I'm into what's happening here. But the last thing I'll throw out on there, given the choice, or like when students go, oh, I can't decide if I want to save up money for Hume or if I want to try and raise the money for the mission trip, and I think I can only do one, we always push toward the mission trip. Always always looking at, if I have to pick one, if you could give up something for your summer, give up camp. I mean, we'll play, we'll have fun, we'll have games, and we have church all summer, so it's not like you can't hear about Jesus and have a good time with us all summer long. But when it comes to being on the mission trip and doing it that way, I think there's nothing better, nothing that comes closer to the heart of what Christ commanded us to do. Fulfilling the Great Commission was not summer camp.
Right. Yeah.
That's a good one.
Ben.
Tweet that.
At Brian is unfallen. Go for
it. So I've actually never done a summer camp with our student ministry, and that's a whole other conversation. But it's mainly because we actually typed it out, I guess. It's mainly just because adult leaders, I always take into consideration that of like if an adult leader gets 2 weeks of or vacation time, like I don't want to take up half of that by sending them to camp. And like, not that our small group leaders wouldn't want to or anything like that, but more I'd rather use them for other events throughout the year rather than 1 week of camp and take up almost all their vacation time. So that's why we didn't always do camp. And with mission trips, you need much less adult leaders to go on. That's it for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in my context, the reason why we do both is my mindset is summer camp is the big wide open arms where we want anybody and everybody to come, the unsaved to the saved, everybody to be there, and we just want that to be a giant group of people. Where for the mission trip, I want it to be only those who are not only serious about their walk with Christ, but also those who are serious about working. Because if I'm taking you, across to another country, I want to be able to trust you that you're not going to get stopped by airport security for something stupid, and different things like that. So my mentality is I want to take 30, 40, 50, 60 kids to camp, but I only want to take a 15-passenger bus for the mission trip. You know what I'm saying? That's all I want to take is a small group for the mission trip, because I want to be able to have a group of people that I can trust, and the people who are serious about the mission trip to go with us. So with that being said, the way I price the mission trip is going to be greater than the summer camp, because I want those who are going on the mission trip to know that you're going to work hard for this. And so and I think the issue of resources is a good question, because some people can't afford both. Before our summer camp, we have the kids paying for it. Before our mission trip, we tell them this: if you can pay your deposit and you're willing to work, you can raise all your money. And like we have a kid. I always use this kid as an example in our youth group, who he's just like one of those kids that's just like zoned out the whole time, and he's just like, life is awesome and everything doesn't matter, right? He was able to raise 150% more, 150% of his total mission trip last year. And our mission trip last year was like $1,600, and so he was able to raise an extra $825 on top of how much he was able to raise for the mission trip. And so, like I always say, if he can do it, everybody can raise money for a mission trip without worrying about coming out of their pocket. And so that's my philosophy with camp and mission trips. I always do both, because, like, you're right, Jesus, the Great Commission is not about summer camps, and I want summer camps to be a place where everyone can come. But for the mission trip, I want those who are like, hey, this is an opportunity to be serious about our walk, to be serious about the Great Commission, and
Yes.
going and stuff like that. And so
Absolutely.
I always expect a very small percentage of the youth group to go on the mission trip in the summer camp. So that's our little philosophy with that. Go ahead, Ben.
I was gonna say it's always we had a few students on our last mission trip who they meet their goal and they just stopped putting in any effort in to fundraise, and it's like, no, you got to help out the team,
Yeah.
but that's the worst. So I want to finish this up in the next like 10 minutes, so let's start flying through our answers a bit quicker,
Sure.
guys.
Okay.
So what are the benefits of I don't know. What are the benefits of planning your own camp or mission trip rather than going through an organization for a mission trip or camp?
I'll,
To go
I'll,
first.
I'll go first because I plan my own missions trip, but I do an organizational camp. The reason why like, for example, with domestic trips, I don't feel like there's necessarily a reason to go with an organization because you can find enough people within the country and maybe in specific cities to plan your own missions trips. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I know Keith Parker does New York, and that's one thing I just want to pick his brain because that sounds like an amazing missions trip that he was
Yeah.
able to do himself in an amazing city like New York. And so this is like my fifth year playing a mission trip in Florida, and I just know enough people where I can do my own mission trip, get the places to stay, get the people to cook food for us that it's going to be more affordable in the end run than going with an organization, which I feel like for mission trip organizations, there's a lot of overhead that you're paying for that you could just do the experience for a lot cheaper if you plan it yourself. Now for summer
Yeah.
camps, this is my only excuse for going to organizations and not doing it ourselves. And it has nothing to do with the size of our youth group because I agree with a lot of people. You can do an awesome summer camp with a small group. But there's something about being in a room with 1,000 other kids and worshiping Jesus that adds an element to our students to say, like, this is amazing. Where it would be just as awesome, like in our winter retreat, like 2 weeks ago, we were worshiping with just like the 40 of us in a room, and it was amazing. There's something about summer camp, being with 1,000 kids in the giant auditorium, singing "How He Loves," that like just is an awesome firework to your summer camp. And so that's why we go with organizations like Student Life because one, I know they're going to teach awesome stuff, but two, they give you that experience. And that's so hard to replicate unless you have a huge budget. So that's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think on the so the question is about ultimately about budgeting. I don't remember the actual question. I'm just responding to what Frank's saying.
The question was basically whether it's better to do your own thing versus not do your own thing. You know what I'm saying? And why do what you do.
I think for it, depending on, and I don't know what exactly Keith has done, but I know he does very cool things and has a lot of success. But there's a book out there called When Helping Hurts, and that's something that I can't ever get away from when I think about missions, and especially with missions, why I love to, even for domestic, try and partner with somebody there and make sure that what we're doing is a benefit and a positive action for long term for the community that we're visiting. For instance, like when we went to Mexico last year, we're visiting an orphanage just outside of Tijuana and Tecate, and when we go there, I mean, we're mixing up all this concrete and stuff, and we're doing these things. And I'm talking with one of the guys from the facility, and he's like, "We literally bought this concrete when you guys paid your deposit for housing. Like we don't sit around with pallets full of concrete waiting for people to show up and mix it for us. Like we base our entire, like their ministry model is largely based off of groups coming in and visiting, and like this is how we're going to do things. You know what I mean? Like when we get a labor force and some funding from people paying for a mission trip, we're going to build, we're going to shore up our walls, and they've got it planned out, for probably a couple years at this point of like, as groups come through, these are all the projects to do on the list, and these are the things we're going to be able to do. These are the ministries that they can be involved in that would benefit from a large boost at that point. Like, hey, our evangelism night's going to be off the chain this week because we got 40 extra people, that kind of thing, where it's not hurting the community. They're partnering, we're partnering with the existing ministry and supplementing that in a way that's beneficial to them long term, so they can use us to lay groundwork for new things they're doing and build off those in the future, which I think that's something that's really hard to do well on your own without an organization to partner with. And even, like I said earlier, like I come from an AG background, Assemblies of God. That was one, and one thing about them, the reason they formed was largely to make missions go better, because they were like, we can't support full-time missionaries as a church at 30 people in the country, but if 100 churches get together and form an organization, we can pay for some people to go out and live the gospel in another place. And that concept of how can we band together in a larger group to make something happen that's going to be worthwhile, that goes beyond, that multiplies beyond just what we're able to do on our own. That's the kind of thing that I love about international missions work is, or even for domestic missions, but partnering with people who are doing stuff already. Like when I was in Huntington Beach as a youth pastor and took my group just down the way to Santa Ana, where all these people, all these homeless people hang out at the Civic Center. And I didn't just go down there and start throwing sandwiches and clothing at homeless people. We talked with people who were there day in, day out, and said, what is it that we could do with 20 or 30 people that would be a benefit to what you guys are doing? And they're like, hey, it'd be fun for you guys to come out and just, we'll have a day where we feed them and just have a lot of people to hang out and hear their stories. And so we went and did that, and that was a huge benefit. And knowing the people running the organization that's there every day, I was able to follow up and keep finding out that, hey, that was a huge benefit, and they did have, that changed their perception, and also the people around the Civic Center who aren't homeless, who always look at them with kind of a frown, seeing all these, like kids from Huntington Beach hanging out with them and not judging them and not telling them to get out of there, helped change some perspectives of the community toward that element of society as well. And so anything we can do like that makes sure that the long-term impact is a benefit, and not throwing a party for 20 kids in Mexico that the city's got to clean up for afterward, and like, oh, but we built a hut, so it was fine.
Right.
You know what I mean?
When it comes to just like the mission trips, planning them versus going to them, or specifically summer camps, I've done both. We've planned them and we've gone to them, and I find that like the ones that I've planned, it seems that there's just a couple things that have happened in our past. There's room for error. I planned them with other youth pastors. The last one I did with 2 other youth groups. We kind of administered the load, but I just find like when you trust in this guy to do this, do this, we show up. You got your work done. What if the one guy does it? Hopefully that's not the way it happens, but with us there was a couple of things where like in the middle of our camp there's like this massive amount of downtime, and like we were told that they were going to have an activity planned here, which we were on it, we had fun, we made up our own stuff on the spot, but like we just felt like some of those things could have been patched if they were done by a professional organization who just does this.
Right.
And like another thing is, I find in my experience sometimes when you plan your own, it becomes a nickel and dime thing.
Right.
Like, at least for us, like I set this price for the kids, and then the guy who's kind of helping with all the money, he goes, oh, by the way, there's this fee, and now our student ministry has to eat the fee because I've already paid for all the kids, And man, like that seriously, it really ate my budget last year, and we planned our own. And then kind of the last thing, this is the most important, like if I'm worried about program over here going on, if I got leaders doing this, it's less time with me with the kids, and I want to be with my kids. That's why I go to camp. Camp, for me, in a sense, summer camp in a way plays into the Great Commission because we're making disciples. It's not going, in that sense, but there is this element of I'm doing life with these kids. And if I'm worried about programs so much that I'm not doing life, I don't do that. Now, mission trips, I think you're kind of spot on, man. Like, I don't know the needs of the people in the Philippines. There's a guy I'm talking to in the Philippines now. He just started a youth ministry there, and we're working at trying to hopefully get over there in the next year and a half, 2 years. but the things I think would be the need is nothing like what is really the need. So at the end of the day, I think you're right, man. It's good to have contacts over there, but to kind of pull into Frank's element, if we can work directly with them and bypass some of the middlemen, you know, we can do more. We can bring more resources and we can do more. So that's where I'm at on the whole situation.
Good stuff.
Ben?
You go.
Oh, yeah, you got nothing? All right. Well, and just to follow up with what everyone said, I agree with what you. I think one thing that everyone needs to be mindful of when they talk about mission trips, though, is to make sure you are with an organization that is helping that community, not just giving a regurgitating experience for a bunch of youth groups. You know what I'm saying? Because I think some mission organizations, especially geared towards student ministry, are just giving an experience, but like you're just repainting a 20th layer on that building. You know what I'm saying? And we don't need to be doing. The Gospel Coalition wrote a great post about that, about student ministry mission trips, like hurting communities and stuff like that. But like, and I know Ben knows this. We went with an organization called Pura Vida in Costa Rica, who they are the catalyst of change, and they are working with orphans, and they're working with single moms. And when you go there, all you're doing is coming alongside what they're doing year round. And so that's the thing that we need to be with more often. So, Ben, any last questions you want to ask before we sign off? What do you think?
No questions, but I would just say, like, I agree with all the points of going to a program summer camp. Like, there's huge pros to it of just being with the other students, your students seeing there's other Christians their age. Like, you can never sort of match that when students see they're not alone in that. That you get to bring in great speakers. Like, if I had been at a youth group, Frank, I would have loved to go onto the camp he went to last year with Matt Chandler as a speaker. Like, there's huge positives to that. Yeah. But the inverse, like, I think there's also big positives of planning your own, even if it is small. That we were going into semantics earlier of, is that a retreat or a camp? And I don't think that matters. Like, if there's a time for your students to get away, whether it's for 2 days or 5 days, learn about God, make memories together, like, that's camp. And so if you do your own, it can be a lot more work, but there's great resources out there that your students are going to be focused on your community and not trying to impress girls in some other community. You get to put your logo on the T-shirt rather than advertising some other organization at your schools. You're advertising your student ministry. Just all those things. Yeah. So the big takeaway I'd say is, like, don't ever feel like, oh, I have 10 kids, I can't plan my own retreat, or I can't plan my own mission trip. Because the best mission trips are when there are only 15 to 20 students, and it's going to be a lot easier to plan if you have 10 than 100. But don't feel too small to do stuff.
That's why I do short mission trips. Yeah, that's good.
Brian, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, and there's a question here on the Q&A that kind of addressed it too, but on the idea, like I said, like, we go to the biggest camp in California, the most expensive one I've ever heard of. And at the same time, I've run my own winter camp where, you know, with a couple leaders where, like, the issue of not having time with your students or whatever, like, you can still hit so much of without having camp programming get in the way. Where if you're doing your own retreat camp, whatever you want to call it, but keeping your budget down and keeping it to, like, whatever it costs you to rent a place for 5 days and just get away with people, or get away for 3 days for a winter camp or a weekend retreat or whatever. But that the important aspect of that is giving them that, like you said, getting away, and not how much money you spent, but giving them a chance to just not be distracted by anything but Jesus, and having the fellowship and encouragement of other believers around. You can totally engage with that, even just partnering with a local church in another area if you need them to have that experience from kids outside of your group. And I think that can be just as beneficial with an extra 10 than an extra 1,000.
Yeah. So I want to try and take a look of, we sort of talked about earlier, we also we've planned our own, but we also go to programs with it. What are the challenges, benefits to planning your own camp? I'd say for me, the benefit is I know what the speaker's going to say, because either I'm speaking, or I'm having church leadership speaking, or I'm bringing in somebody that I know. I feel like almost all the time when I go to a programmed one that's just sort of a local retreat center, I'm always disappointed with the speaker. And maybe that's just me being too critical, but yeah, I'm always like, I got my students here, I brought them here to learn about the gospel, and then you were completely unorganized with your notes. So I always am like, thanks for. It never meets up to my standards of what I wanted for my students when I go to a programmed one. So that's a huge benefit, is knowing that you get to go as deep as you want with your students.
Good. With me and the reason why I choose student life, and I mean, here's the thing, I'm not trying to sell student life, because I would go, I mean, I went to a camp which is not student life that had propaganda as the speaker, and if you haven't heard propaganda speak, it's as good as the spoken word poetry and his rap music. But like like when I look at a camp, I always choose like two things, like who is the speaker and who is the worship band, because the location's irrelevant. Like a kids will have fun whether they're in the middle of the desert or they're at the beach. I mean, to me, it doesn't really matter what
You're
the
right.
location is. What matters is that speaker going to kill it? Thus, why we went to a kid that had Matt Chandler and or propaganda, and then who the band is. You know what I'm saying? Like those matter way more to me than the location.
Yeah.
But in terms of doing your own camp, like I can only speak on to what I did when a winter retreat. So the pros are obviously you can control what is being spoken out and said and stuff like that. And you can also kind of control the environment. But I think the biggest issue, and I think Delmar brought it up really well, was a problem is you don't get to spend a ton of time with your kids unless you bring in a speaker for the organization, for the camp. You know what I'm saying? Because with me, like the winter retreat, I was running around everywhere, and that was only a 3-day retreat. I know with a summer camp, I'm such a perfectionist when it comes to camp that I want it to go so smoothly that the kids will never see me. I'm always thinking about like what's next in the event, and I'll be running around where like summer camps, I just want to be there with the students and answer any questions. But at the same time, I don't want to be at a camp where most of my time is cleaning up what the speaker said because he's a heretic. So,
Yeah.
so those two things matter so much to me. But like you said, I think here's one more thing though, and I'll say this because I know how much Brian's charging for his camp, and maybe he doesn't want to share that for the sake of not being beheaded or something. But like I know with me, unless I'm moving to California, I don't want to charge more than $300 for a summer camp. And if it ever gets to the point where I'm charging more than $300 for a summer camp, I'm doing my own camps, and I'll just make it work. You know what I'm saying? Like I'll do everything I can to make it work because I don't want to charge my kids more than that. You know what I'm saying? And I'll link up with other youth pastors and youth groups to do that or something like that. But that's my thing. Is I never want to be able to charge too much where kids can't come, but at the same time, I want to make sure the speaker isn't saying heresy and I have to clean it up for the whole week and a half. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think. Oh,
Honestly,
go ahead, Delmar.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right with you guys as far as know who your speaker is. I mean, I literally, the first year I came on at my church I'm at now, I've been here 8 years, was they went to the same camp forever. And we showed up at the camp, and the guy gets in front of all my kids. He goes, I was on the way here, and God just gave me a word, so I threw my whole message away. And he just starts going. He just starts going. Man. And, like, this is very, very popular camp on this coast, man. It is really big. I remember looking down the line, and 90% of my kids were asleep. I'm not talking about like 50. I'm talking almost all of them were asleep. They don't remember anything from that. And then we went to another camp, and it was just their entire speaking was done through skits. Like no one ever got up there and preached the gospel.
That's weird.
And they're like, respond to the skits. And I'm just like, you're going to respond to a skit? I get it, but no. So I'm with you, man. And finally, we landed at a place where like, this guy, he goes through 7 things. So I know if my students stay there, their full student year, they're getting 7 really good things that they all need. So having that, building that relationship, I think that's something else to speak to. Build relationship with the camps you go to, with the people there. If you build relationships, they get to know you better. They can speak to you better.
That's great.
Amen. The one. Oh no, I go to the massive camp, and at the camp price posted on their website is like $500, and so that's an expensive camp, and we add a little to that to help with transport and feeding students on the way there, because nothing's worse than stopping for lunch and having 30 kids tell you they didn't bring lunch money.
Right.
But we on the planning side of it, if you're not going to go all out and plan well and work with some people that are going to do it well, like I'm not even talking quality of speaker. Like, you get to control those things, so do it right. But even if you just have like the kids who always lead worship at your youth group, or the college intern that you've got, or whatever it, or your buddy's worship leader from the church, you know, whatever it is, whoever you get to bring in, like, that stuff's not as important as like just plan stuff so that it fits well. And if you can't plan things well and you don't have somebody that can plan things well, I think doing your own camp is probably the worst thing you could do to your students, because you're going to take them away for a few days to torture them with disorganization, boredom, and a bunch of crappy programming.
Right.
But
Yeah.
you know, and if that's where you're at, but if you can plan it well, go for it. But I think you hit like a peak where if you're not hitting like really good, once you get to a certain size and you've got to be charging more for facility and for speaker and bigger band and lights and all that, you might as well go to a good organization and pay big. Because I mean, like, if anybody's ever heard of Chris Brown from North Coast Church down in San Diego, he's he's a legit speaker. He speaks in this really cool kind of story method. And it's super Jesus centered, and he's hilarious and awesome. And I mean, he'll go for over an hour, and every student is like totally like, what's he gonna say next? Like, that was amazing. They're still talking about it 2 years later. I mean, like, it's crazy. So for that kind of money, that's what we're getting out of Hume, and it's always legit.
Yeah.
So you know, I wouldn't pay big without knowing a lot about another camp, but for Hume, I could do it.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we've gone over our 40 minutes, well, our 25 minutes that we try and keep to, but hopefully this conversation has been one that you've enjoyed tuning into and listening. And thanks for asking the questions. And we'll see you guys on next Monday. So have a great week.
See you guys later.
Yep. Say bye, Frank.